Few small animals have given rise to as many legends as the spider. Greek mythology tells us about a maiden by the name of Arachne, who had been taught to weave by none other than the goddess Pallas Athene. Proud of her newly acquired skill, the girl challenged. Using the first loose circling as a construction aid, the spider weaves the viscid spiral. It measures the length of the spans of the viscid spiral using its front legs and pulls each thread taut before attaching it to the next radius with the scales on its hind legs. At the same time, the spider gives the web a tug so that the layer of adhesive breaks up into a row of sticky beads. The thin, oily substance covering the spider's legs prevents it from becoming entangled in the gummy threads. The masterpiece of beauty and architecture is completed in an hour. The cross spider often waits for its prey at the central hub of the web and sometimes moves to a hiding place on the edges of the web. The spider keeps its front legs on the signal thread which leads to the center. With its keen sense of vibration, it can easily sense the struggles of an insect which has flown into the web. In its struggles to free itself, the dragonfly gets more and more entangled in the spider's web. The sticky threads alone cannot hold a large insect for long, and the spider must attack quickly in order to keep its catch and stop it from damaging the web too much. First, the spider bites the dragonfly with a fang secreting an immobilizing poison. Then it proceeds to wrap the victim in its silk. The spider attaches numerous threads to its victim by pressing its abdomen against it and at the same time spinning it round with its hind legs. Wide bands of wrapping thread come from the spinnerets. In a few seconds, the relatively large prey is completely immobilized. As it moves between its catch and the nest, the spider secretes a security line consisting of two separate flexible strands. This is an important way to secure easy access to the new food supply. By now, the poison, which at first merely immobilized the dragonfly, has proved fatal. The cross spider usually eats its prey in the middle of the web. As a precaution against outside interference, it severs the extra strands holding the catch in order to be able to rush its meal to the nest if necessary. In the same way, the spider prevents the web from being excessively damaged by large insects. The spider keeps a check on how securely the prey is attached to the web and adds a few tight lines whenever it notices a weak spot. Spiders can only take nourishment in liquid form. Digestive enzymes are secreted onto the captured insect, dissolving it into a soupy consistency easy for the spider to suck up. But now we can leave this forest dweller to digest its meal and move on to the lush lakeshore meadow and small ponds surrounded by reeds and horsetail, which are the habitat of the largest spider in Scandinavia. The raft spider has adapted well to life in the wetlands. In addition to 4 pairs of legs for walking, it has 2 pairs of outer jaws, with nails in front of the mouth aperture, which the spider uses to hold on to its prey and tear it to pieces. The raft spider uses the water's surface tension and runs on top of the surface like a water boatman. The surface tension gives way very little under the spider's long legs, as it searches for food in the form of insects that have fallen into the water and others that live there. To escape any potential enemy, the raft spider can dive under the surface and stay there for several minutes. In spite of its 8 eyes, the raft spider is very nearsighted. However, it is very sensitive to the slightest vibration. The raft spider reaches sexual maturity in the 3rd summer of its life. The female lays several hundred eggs, which she then conceals in a spherical silk cocoon. She carries this around, holding onto it with her jaws. Other species, such as this Pisaura mirabilis, called the heather spider in Finnish, also carry their valuable load around in this cumbersome-looking manner. This species of the hunting spider attaches its egg cocoon to its spinnerets, where it hangs during the 2 weeks or so it takes for the eggs to hatch. One species that preys on other spiders keeps its eggs safe on the end of a short pole. Shortly before the young hatch, the raft spider suspends its egg cocoon between a few reeds and spins a protective web around it. Upon hatching, the young gather in the center of the web, forming a living ball. The slightest vibration sends them scurrying for safety in all directions, only to reassemble as a tight group again. The female stands guard over the nest, never venturing very far from it. From time to time she checks to see that everything is all right in the nest, moving gently to avoid disturbing the young. The wolf spider, which hides in crevices in the ground, takes care of its young in a completely different way. It carries the newly hatched babies around on its back. In the nest, the young raft spiders get hardly anything to eat. The mother guards them until the last one has left the nest. When the water is warm, life flourishes in the shallow inlets of lakes and ponds. The well-lit water, rich in plankton, provides shelter and food for small fish, and also for the predatory dragonfly nymph, which uses its hind legs for propulsion in the water, for the larva of the diving beetle bobbing up and down, and for other small animals. This is also the habitat of the only species of spider which has adapted to the water so well that it spends its whole life cycle there. The water spider has a hairy abdomen surrounded by a layer of air, which gives it a silvery look. This spider builds its nest in the water. First, it spins a web of thin silk onto an aquatic plant. The nest is dense and open at the bottom. Each one of these lines is a combination of many thin strands squeezed from the ducts in the spider's spinning gland. An individual strand might not be more than a few 100,000ths of a millimeter thick. Wherever it moves around the nest, the water spider leaves a thin strand of silk which anchors the nest securely to its base. When the silken net is ready, the spider floats to the surface and gathers the air it needs to breathe around its hairy abdomen. As it turns quickly, a bubble of air is trapped between its hind legs and abdomen, which the spider then transports under the airtight net. After this operation has been repeated several times, the net bulges upwards, forming a kind of diving bell. During the day, the spider rests in its diving bell, and when the night comes, it goes out hunting. The spider carries its prey to the bell, where it secretes digestive fluids onto the victim and ingests the dissolved food. A dragonfly nymph would like to catch the water spider, but he is in for an unpleasant surprise. The spider defends itself by spraying an irritating liquid on the nymph and escapes. With most spiders, the female is larger than the male, but with the water spider, it is the other way around. During mating, the mature males enthusiastically seek out the females. The females must, however, be ready, or they quickly send importunate suitors on their way. The perceptive capacities of animals are determined and limited by their senses. Most of these sensory organs of the spiders, the receptors of touch, smell and taste, are in the limbs. The limbs are covered with tactile hairs and microscopic sensory hairs, which help the spider recognize its food and, among other things, the opposite sex. Touching the female outside the nest is thought to have significance as a courtship ritual. This unfortunate male didn't succeed even on the second attempt, and had to settle for the female's abandoned dwelling as a consolation prize. The water spider waves its front legs when it confronts the opposite sex. It is thought that this is a way of releasing aggression. It is very difficult for us to imagine the sensory world of the spider, because the differences between the senses of the spider and those of man are so total. Many of the sensory organs of the spider are not yet well understood. We do know, however, the spiders get very accurate information about their environment through channels that are very different from those of man. In many ways, the immediate sensory ability of spiders is much greater than that of man, and they can sense things beyond our wildest dreams. Some of the tactile hairs on spiders' legs are specially designed for judging the distance and shape of nearby objects by sensing slight air currents and vibrations. This enables the spider to sense something approaching from a distance. The water spider can spend several consecutive days in its diving bell without having to replace its air. These spiders' courtship also takes place in the bell, and the female lays her eggs there. The hatched young stay in the mother's care for a few weeks. When the summer sun shines, giving a gentle warmth to the breeze blowing above the meadows, it is just the right kind of weather for various insects that waft with delicate wings in the air, buzz among the flowers, and hum among the grass and leaves. The Misumena vatia, called the flower spider in Finnish, hangs on to a safety line, waiting for a breeze to blow it somewhere else. This spider, one of the crab spiders, lives in meadows and fields. It has a flat body with front legs that are longer than the other legs and point sideways. Wherever it moves, the Misumena vatia secretes 12 safety lines along which it can escape quickly, either by lowering itself to the ground or by retreating to where it came from. The Misumena vatia does not spin a web to catch insects. Instead, it waits for its prey inside flowers. Like a chameleon, it can change its color to match its surroundings, which makes for impenetrable camouflage. The hoverfly, an expert in the air. The Misumena vatia usually hides in white or yellow flowers, where many insects come for nectar. This spider's sight is especially sensitive to movement. It is very patient and does not attack until its intended victim is within the reach of its long limbs. The meadow grasshopper sings its love song to the female by rubbing the bases of its wings together. The Misumena vatia seizes its victim with its two front legs. It needs the sharp claws to hold on to the victim and to anchor itself to the flower. The insects preyed on by this spider are usually much larger than the spider itself. In addition to flies, bees and bumblebees, many butterflies, such as this Chrysophonus, are included on the menu of this minuscule predator. Saved at the last moment. Spiders are much more important to man in the ecological balance than most other animal groups. The hundreds of spiders that inhabit each square meter of forest and field eat masses of insect pests and are themselves the best food of small vertebrates and birds. The flower fly is now beyond all help. The spider bites its victim, and the poison in the sharp jaws works quickly on the nervous system and circulation of the victim. The spider then sucks out the fly's body fluids, leaving an empty shell. The most serious threat to the spider is the chemical pollution of the environment, which has brought many species near the point of extinction. The glittering gossamers of the maid arachne have become increasingly rare, even in the Finnish forests.